Say hello to Derek and Miles. They're both 33. They live in the same city. They both bring home $82,000 a year. And after a decade of, let's be honest, pretty unglamorous discipline, skipping the daily coffee run, driving the same car a few extra years, telling themselves the store-brand pasta sauce is basically the same. Spoiler, it's not, but both of them have managed to save up $80,000. On paper, they're financial twins. In every other way, not even close. Derek's a planner. He likes knowing exactly what next year looks like. He wants a front door that's HS, a garage he'll slowly fill with tools he'll use. What, twice? And a yard he's going to defend like it's sovereign territory. Miles is wired the total opposite way. He likes having exits. He doesn't know where he'll be in 5 years. And that uncertainty, it doesn't scare him. It excites him. The thought of being tied to one mortgage, one zip code, for 30 years? Yeah, that makes him a little uneasy. Those two personalities are about to send them down two very different financial roads. Derek's going to buy a house. Miles is going to keep renting and invest the difference. And over the next 20 years, we're going to track every mortgage payment, every rent hike, every surprise repair bill, and every single dollar Miles puts into the market instead of a down payment. At the end, we'll find out what happens when two people with identical incomes, identical savings, take two completely different paths. Let's get into it. Derek and Miles both start out renting in the same mid-sized city. After a long stretch of open houses, disappointing listings, and enough Zillow scrolling to lose an entire weekend to, Derek finds it. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath place with a small yard and a garage big enough for gym equipment he'll touch twice a year. He makes an offer. The home costs $360,000. Derek puts down $72,000, 20%, leaving him with a $288,000 mortgage. But the down payment isn't the whole bill. There's also the pile of extra costs nobody warns you about: closing fees, lender charges, title insurance, inspections, prepaid taxes, and somewhere around 40 pages he's asked to sign without fully reading. Closing costs typically land between 2 and 5% of the purchase price. On a $360,000 home, that's roughly $7,200 to $18,000. Let's call it $10,800. So before Derek has unpacked a single box, his entire $80,000 in savings is gone. $72,000 to the down payment, $10,800 to closing costs. And he's actually a little short, covering the gap with a small gift from family. He locks in a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%. His monthly principal and interest payment comes out to roughly $1,916, and that's before the extras. Add about $360 a month in property taxes, $155 in homeowner's insurance, and another $300 he sets aside monthly for maintenance, close to 1% of the home's value per year. All in, Derek's housing cost lands around $2,731 a month. Miles, meanwhile, rents a comparable 3-bedroom nearby for $2,050 a month. No property tax bill, no insurance premium. And if the furnace dies at 2 a.m., that's a phone call to the landlord, not a plumber. That leaves Miles with roughly $681 extra every single month compared to Derek. For a second, that money starts looking like a very good excuse for a trip somewhere warm. He doesn't take it. Instead, he takes his $80,000 and drops it straight into a broad market index fund. And from that point forward, every dollar he ISN't spending on housing goes in right alongside it. Early on, Miles' plan looks strong. Similar house, lower monthly cost, and his money's already working for him. The equity myth. Now here's usually where somebody jumps in and says, sure, but Miles is just flushing $2,050 down the drain every month. Derek's mortgage is building him equity. Technically, that's true. But it's a lot less true than people think, especially early on. In Derek's very first mortgage payment, $1,680 goes to interest. Add $360 in property tax, $155 in insurance, $300 set aside for maintenance. Out of his $2,731 monthly cost, only about $236 AC2ally builds equity. The other $2,495? That's simply the price of living in the house. Not an investment. Just an expense, with a nicer view. Miles pays $2,050 in rent and builds zero equity from it. That part's true. But treating mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, and a leaking roof as investing, while calling rent wasted money, isn't really honest math. It's a story people tell themselves to feel better about a 30-year commitment. Fast forward 3 years. Derek's made 36 payments and learned rule number ONI of homeownership. Every strange noise in the house now has a price tag attached to it. One Sunday, the water heater gives out. Derek watches a 12-minute video titled, "Anyone Can Fix This in an Afternoon." 5 hours later, he's on the phone with an AC2L plumber. The repair runs him a few $100s. Annoying, but exactly what his maintenance fund exists for. After 3 years, Derek's mortgage balance has dropped from $288,000 to roughly $278,400, just under $9,600 in principal paid down, assuming 3 to 4% annual appreciation. His home is now worth somewhere between $393,000 and $405,000. That puts his home equity at roughly $115,000 to $127,000. That's real, tangible wealth. Miles, over those same 3 years, has paid about $76,000 in rent. But his original $80,000 stayed fully invested. At a 10% average annual return, that alone has grown to around $106,000. Add his monthly contributions plus their growth, and his total portfolio sits at roughly $135,000. So after 3 years, it's remarkably close. Derek's built equity. Miles has built a portfolio. Derek can knock down a wall if he feels like it. Miles can be in a different city by next month. As the years pass, the math on both sides starts to shift. Derek's principal and interest payment is locked. It never moves. But his total housing cost still creeps up. Property taxes rise with the home's value, insurance premiums increase, and an aging house tends to need more expensive attention over time. Miles doesn't have a fixed cost at all. His rent starts at $2,050, but it climbs every year. $2,050 becomes roughly $2,110, then $2,175, then a little more the year after that. Nothing about his apartment has changed, just the number leaving his account each month, going up by about 3% annually. His original $681 monthly advantage slowly starts to disappear. This is where time starts tilting toward Derek. His payment stays flat, while Miles keeps climbing. But Miles still has one enormous advantage working quietly in the background. His original $80,000, compounding in the market this entire time. At 10% a year, that sum Elon has the potential to multiply dramatically over 2 decades, long before counting anything he adds on top of it. That's opportunity cost. And it's one of the most underrated numbers in this whole comparison. Derek's money isn't wasted either. It went into an appreciating asset. But at D have an alternative use, and an honest comparison has to account for that. Year 10. Derek is now 43. His home, appreciating at 3 to 4% annually, is worth somewhere between $483,000 and $532,000. His mortgage balance has fallen to roughly $247,000. That puts his home equity between $236,000 and $285,000. He now walks through his living room like a man who owns roughly half the drywall. Along the way, he spent real money on repairs and upkeep. Some of it added value. Some of it simply kept the house from slowly falling apart. Miles has kept investing the entire time. His original $80,000, growing at 10% annually, is now worth roughly $207,000 on its own. Add 10 years of monthly contributions, shrinking slightly each year as rent climbed, and his total portfolio lands around $298,000. So at the 10-year mark, Miles is still ahead, on paper. But his rent has changed too. What started at $2,050 is now pushing close to $2,760 a month. Derek's mortgage payment? Still $1,916, exactly where it started. Year 20. Derek and Miles are both 53 now. Derek's home, still appreciating at 3 to 4% a year, is now worth somewhere between $650,000 and $790,000. His mortgage balance has fallen to about $165,000. His home equity sits somewhere between $485,000 and $625,000. Miles' portfolio has also had 20 years to compound. His original $80,000 alone is now worth roughly $538,000. Layer on 2 decades of monthly contributions, plus their growth, and his total portfolio lands around $770,000. So on pure net worth, Miles edges ahead. But the 2 piles of wealth don't behave the same way. Miles' money is liquid, a few clicks, and it's cash. Derek can't sell off 10% of his kitchen to cover an emergency. Miles still carries one cost that never goes away though: rent. After 20 years of 3% annual increases, his original $2,050 is now close to $3,700 a month. Derek has 10 years left on his mortgage. Miles' rent has no finish line at all. the part the spreadsheet doesn't show. Miles' entire outcome rests on O&E condition. He actually had to invest the difference every single month. 2 decades. When the market climbs, you invest. When it drops 30% and every headline says the sky is falling, you invest. When your group chat is full of people buying investment properties and you're still renting a 2-bedroom, you invest anyway. That kind of discipline looks easy on a spreadsheet. It's a lot harder in real life. For a lot of people, that extra money quietly becomes a nicer car, a couple of vacations, a slightly upgraded lifestyle. And years later, the portfolio that looked amazing in theory never actually existed in practice. A mortgage, on the other hand, forces the issue. Derek never has to decide, month after month, whether he feels like building equity today. The payment happens automatically, whether he's motivated or not. And behaviorally, that matters more than most people give it credit for. But buying has real weaknesses too. Time. If Derek had sold after just 3 years, closing costs on the way in, selling costs on the way out, and years of interest-heavy payments could have wiped out most of his gains. Buying needs time to pay off. It's not built for short stays. Mobility. Picture both of them getting a great job offer in another state a few years in. Miles gives notice, packs 2 suitcases, and leaves. Derek has decisions to make. Sell the house and eat the transaction costs, or become a long-distance landlord, juggling a mortgage in one city and rent in another. Hopping a tenant covers the gap. Any shortfall comes straight out of his pocket. Concentration risk. Miles owns a slice of thousands of companies across the entire economy. Derek owns O&E House, on O&E Street, in O&E neighborhood. If that neighborhood booms, great. If it struggles, he can't just rebalance by selling the guest bathroom. Liquidity. If Miles suddenly needs $25,000, he sells part of his portfolio and it's in his account within days. If Derek needs $25,000, his options are a refinance, a home equity loan, or selling the house outright. Equity is wealth. It's just wealth that's hard to spend in a hurry. So which one actually wins? Honestly, it depends. Buying tends to make more sense the longer you plan to stay. Somewhere around 7 to 10 plus years gives the transaction costs time to be absorbed, gives principal paydown time to build up, and lets a fixed payment become more valuable as rent keeps climbing around you. Buying also makes more sense when home prices are reasonable relative to rent. One quick gut check is the price-to-rent ratio. Divide the home price by a comparable property's annual rent. A $360,000 home against $24,600 in annual rent gives a ratio of about 14.6. Once that number climbs well above 20, renting usually starts looking a lot more competitive. It's a shortcut though, not the whole answer. Mortgage rates, taxes, insurance, and expected market returns still matter. Renting tends to make more sense when home prices are stretched relative to rent, when flexibility genuinely matters to your life right now, and, critically, when you're actually going to invest what you save. And to be clear, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Buying a house doesn't mean investing stops. Personal finance was never really about picking the new, correct strategy. It's about understanding what you're trading away, either way. Derek traded flexibility and liquidity for stability, leverage, and long-term control over where he lives. Miles traded housing certainty for freedom, liquidity, and a much larger pile of invested money. Neither choice was the smart one by default. Neither was the dumb one either. It really comes down to 2 questions. How long are you actually staying? Because buying and leaving 3 years later is where the math turns against you fast. And if you rent, will you genuinely invest the difference? Because renting for 20 years and spending every dollar you save erases the entire advantage. So no, rent isn't automatically money down the drain. Renters pay rent. Owners pay interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and closing costs. Everyone's paying for housing, one way or another. Homeownership absolutely can build serious wealth, but it's also an illiquid, expensive asset that comes with concentration risk and a roof that will, eventually, ask you for $15,000 with 0 notice. The winner here isn't automatically the homeowner, and it isn't automatically the renter either. Derek needed enough time in the house for buying to pay off. Miles needed enough discipline for renting to pay off. 20 years later, the real difference between them was never really about who bought and who rented. It came down to what each of them actually did after making that choice. If this kind of breakdown is useful, subscribe to Elite Compounder. We take apart the financial decisions people make every day and show you the real numbers behind them. And let me know in the comments, are you buying, renting, or holding out for rates and home prices to drop at the same time? If it's the third one, respect the optimism. See you in the next one.